thank y'all, thank y'all. Bring that music back up just a little bit. Y'all getting in the groove? You like that? Here's a little thing about that music you're listening to right now. No human being ever had anything to do with making that. This is an AI-generated song that I made just for this show. We're going to talk a little bit about all kinds of different things that AI can do. But before we get started, you know, it's here it is, the Thursday of ICAST. We're all getting a little bit worn out. Fantastic show. So I'm going to get everybody loose a little bit. I'm the guy they bring on after lunch to get you loose a little bit. So here's we're going to do a little bit of chair yoga, all right? So here's what I want everybody to do. I want everybody to take your left hand and stick it out there in front of you like this, palm up. Get that left hand out there. You got me. Take that right hand. Let's slide that right on top, right? Now what I want everybody to do is bring that right hand up, bring it back down. Let's go, Gators! There we go. Got y'all. All right. Excellent. That's for you, Rob. Oh. All right. So let's talk then. Make sure I'm going here. Let's talk about AI. And I'm going to show you a quick video clip. There's no audio here, but I'm going to show you a quick video clip to sort of set the tone for how I want to think about AI. First time I saw this clip, this is sort of the visual metaphor I use for how we're thinking about artificial intelligence. All right, you ready? So this is where we're starting. We're playing with a new set of rules with a machine that does not know the rules, and notice that little pause where it had to stop and think about this. So I want to use that as sort of the tone that we're going to be working with today. And I'm going to be talking about AI, but I'm specifically going to be talking about what we're calling generative AI, and I'll explain what that means in just a second. But the first thing I need you all to be aware of is we've got about 30 minutes to talk about a topic that is absolutely freaking massive. So we are going to be in this tiny, tiny little sector of a massive universe galaxy of things that are going on right now in AI. What that means is I am barely touching the tip of the iceberg today. And what I'm also going to tell you is pay attention, keep up, I'm moving fast, and we're all chasing this thing right now, and don't expect to be able to catch everything about it in what I'm going to say or what's going on in Gen A right now all around in all kinds of industry. Now, when John introduced me before, he said that I'm a professor at University of Florida, I am a digital thought leader for Adobe, and right now, for the last 6 months, I have been traveling all over the world talking about generative artificial intelligence, both with how we're teaching at universities and how we're using it in industry. So this is right in the wheelhouse of what I've been doing a lot lately, but again, we are not getting to all of it today, particularly in 30 minutes. If I could teach you everything about generative AI in 30 minutes, my consulting fees would be a mite bit higher. So, all right, first thing I need to point out is that when we're talking about artificial intelligence and we're talking about generative artificial intelligence, most people right now are reacting strictly to the concept of ChatGPT, because when ChatGPT launched in November, it dumped this concept of generative AI in our laps. But generative AI and ChatGPT puts out alphabetic text. It writes things. But the thing we have to recognize about generative AI is that in the orbit of generative AI, we are talking about everything from the chatbots on your phone to the customer response things on your phone to automated calls on your phone. We're also talking about computational work that's being done in terms of mathematics. We're talking about music generation. You just heard my little song playing there that was generated by AI. We're also talking, obviously, about writing content. We're also talking about filmic production. We are also talking about programming, and we're also talking about still images. In other words, when we start talking about generative AI, the first thing we have to recognize is we are basically talking about all media forms. Now, for instance, if this were both a longer session and I were talking about some absolute pragmatics of how to use some of this stuff, I would demo for you some platforms that will literally make the videos for you. Or I will show you things in the new beta of Adobe's Premiere Pro where editing now video or images is basically saying, get rid of that person and they're gone from the film. And it's so much easier and so much more efficient, but I don't have time to demo everything or to demo multiple platforms. Now, I'll talk about various platforms in just a minute. Now, first thing I want to show you is, like I said, ChatGPT dropped in November of last year. So we're here now in July. So we are talking about less than 10 months since we all became aware of generative AI. I want to point out this article from the Los Angeles Times that was published in March of 2014. This article reports about an earthquake that occurred in the morning just outside of Westwood, California in March of 2014. It provides information about the earthquake, where it took place, what the USGS has identified as the epicenter, all the information you wanted to know when you woke up in LA that morning about the earthquake that happened last night. This was written by Generative AI, a program called QuakeBot that the LA Times still uses. No human hand saw this news production, this news story. What I'm pointing out here is that while we became alert to this in November as normal average people, generative AI has been deployed for over a decade in most of the things that we already encounter in content. ESPN reports that something like 60% of their content has AI generation tied to it. CBS, NBC, Fox, all of those news outlets have been using generative AI for close to a decade, turning out content. The only reason that we are now becoming aware of it is because the release of ChatGPT provided a free platform and an easy-to-use platform that any of us can use. So it's new to us, but it's not new to most content producers out there. So those of us who are kind of shocked by what this thing can do, part of it is because we just weren't aware that it was already going on. The other thing I want to point out about ChatGPT is the velocity at which it took over. It dropped in November, and if you look at this chart, it took 5 days before 1 million people used ChatGPT. The next closest thing to have 1 million users was Instagram, and it took them 2.5 months. Think about the velocity of movement and deployment that occurs when you have 1 million people use a platform within 5 days of its release. So what ended up happening was that the media started picking up on, oh my God, everybody's using this, before we ever even got to see what its possibilities were. And given how our media operates, there was lots of immediate doomsaying. Now, if we follow this velocity out, we look at how long it took ChatGPT before it had 100 million monthly users, ChatGPT took 2 months. Imagine having 100 million users log onto your stuff inside of 2 months. TikTok, that hot popular social media video platform, took them 9 months before they could even get close to what ChatGPT is. So part of what we're engaging right now is a velocity of deployment that has blindsided most of the world. The other thing is, all we're talking about is ChatGPT outside in the public, right? Oh, I had ChatGPT do this. We are now witnessing 1,000 new platforms every week in generative AI launch. This means in image manipulation, image making, video, music, film, computation, apps, you name it. We're seeing 1,000 new apps a week. In that velocity, both in terms of the deployment of ChatGPT and the development of new apps, what we should take away from this is not a fad. This is not going away. This is going to bull rush us for a very long time. Now, I want to make clear that one of the things we also have to think about here, and I'm hoping everybody will get this, is that all technology, and I don't mean just digital technology or computer technology, I mean all technology, always only has 2 trajectory paths. One is it becomes naturalized into the background of just how we do things. The other is it becomes obsolete, and it usually becomes obsolete because something better becomes available and we move to the next one. Let me give you a quick, easy example that I use all the time. the spoon. Nobody looks at a spoon and goes, wow, what an amazing piece of technology. But it's technology, and it's been made ubiquitous and put into our background, and it had massive effect on human culture. It changed things like public health. It changed things like cultural interaction. It changed things like culinary approaches. But none of us ever look at a spoon and go, oh, wow, so glad they deployed the spoon and that I'm able to, right? That's what happens with good tech. Nobody right now, for instance, would sit down and think, wow, Word, I'm going to write something in Word, and oh my God, it's ubiquitous, it's part of it. And part of the reason that Word became ubiquitous, and part of the reason ChatGPT became ubiquitous, is what we refer to as Grateful Dead marketing. First one's free, man. And from here on out, they won't be, including ChatGPT. But that's part of making something ubiquitous. So, my task as an educator and somebody consulting in industry regarding generative AI is to first demystify and then teach to deploy. Because the first problem we're seeing with generative AI around the world is, because we were blindsided by it and because most of us don't work in generative AI, is we're all sitting there going, what in the hell is this? And we're knee-jerk reaction. You can't use that. That's not your brain doing the work. I had somebody on the floor yesterday tell me using generative AI is cheating in writing press releases because it's not your brain. So, good luck. See you next week while everybody else is moving on. But my job today is going to demystify, to teach you how this works, and then I'm going to teach you some ways to deploy it. But like I said, I'm trying to do this in 30 minutes. So, oh, and by the way, yeah, all my cool graphics, they're all AI generated, just so you know. So when I talk about AI from two perspectives. This is the part where I want to start pacing and the cameraman's getting worried about, oh God, where is he going to go? I talk about AI from the conceptual position, which is all of the ramifications. What does it mean if we're going to use this? What is it going to do to society, right? We see the media full of how this is going to destroy society. We got to stop AI. All those conceptual what-if questions. And those are very important theoretical, philosophical kinds of questions to ask. But I also talk about the applied AI. How are we going to use this? At the University of Florida, which is currently working to become the world leading research hub in applied artificial intelligence. Over the last 2 years, we've hired over 120 faculty who just work in AI across the university. That notion of applied is crucial. How do we use this stuff? How do we teach people to use this stuff? So whenever I think about AI, these are the two directions I'm coming from. But there's a third direction that I also think about that has direct effect on our industry, and that's material AI. How this stuff is going to, what are the parts, the things, the materials we need to use AI? Because what we don't recognize is that while we all buy into the myth of information traveling from satellites and all of that, that's not where information is really traveling. Information is on cables under the ocean, and companies like Microsoft and the other big server farms are currently creating underwater server farms to address the heat from the servers that are running mass data systems like AI, and we're putting these things into our oceans, and we don't know the ramifications of putting server farms under ocean water. So there is also a materialist consequence here, but I'm not going to go into that. I just find it very relevant given what we all do tied to water issues. So let me demystify for you. Let me show you how this works. I'm going to tell you, first of all, the difference between three things. A computer program, which is a very simple thing. A computer program is a set of linear instructions that tells a machine what to do. That's all it does. It's a set of instructions. Artificial intelligence, which we've been working with now directly as a term and a concept since 1954, allows machines to process information in ways that are similar to how a human brain does this. Now, I'm not going to go through the whole history of how we got from the original concept of artificial intelligence and Turing and the Turing test and whether a robot is thinking or whether it's performing thinking and all of that. But what I want you to understand is that the idea of artificial intelligence is a processing kind of approach to see if it can solve problems at the rate and the level of the human brain. Now, generative AI, which becomes a subset of AI, is basically how do we take all that information an AI is able to process and have it make something new? or something that appears new. So those are the three differences I want you to recognize between a computer program, artificial intelligence, and then generative artificial intelligence. Everybody with me so far? All right, so here's how it works. If you have a generative AI system, and we'll pick on ChatGPT for a little while, what you have to do is you have to ask it or tell it what you want. That's called prompting. I give it a prompt. It's the same idea when your teacher gave you an assignment in school. They give you a writing prompt. You have to write something in response to it. But the way that generative AI works is that once it has the prompt, it goes into a set of data, what's called a large language model. And basically, it's all the information it has access to. Now, with ChatGPT, what that means is anything that's available on the internet, that if you can find it on the internet, ChatGPT does. So the first part of that process is you train the model to look for specific information based on what's asked in the prompt. Now, the reason that I have this in a black box up here is because one of the confusing parts of what goes on in this process is, even though we have created the algorithms for that scrubbing, we don't know how the machine actually looks for the data. We don't know what it does in that process. And so in a lot of ways, we see that as technically as a black box process. It's not, because we know the algorithm, but we've adopted that metaphor. Now, what it's looking for in that scrubbing of the data are recurring patterns, things that happen over and over again in that block of what it's looking for. This is why when you're texting and you have predictive text turn on in your chat, it will guess what the next word is that you are putting up there. Because what it's doing is, as you're typing that word, it's scrubbing its LLM to say, what is the most likely word to follow this word, because that pattern has been repeated the most often in this data set. And a lot of times it's right, and a lot of times it's not what you meant for it to do, but it is providing you what the most often repeated data piece is next. Okay, everybody follow so far? Once it has that, it then takes that information and reorganizes it in a way that it has not seen in those patterns that mimic those patterns but create a new pattern. Everybody follow? That's what it will then give you as the output, okay? So in a nutshell, that is how generative AI works. It looks at a data set, it figures out the patterns for what you're asking, and it gives you something that it thinks is the next pattern. Here's the problem. We grew up in a culture where we were told to show our work. That you don't take a math problem and say 2 + 2 is 4. You got to show me how you got from here to there. So intellectually, we want to know how you got from A to B. Even if not showing me, Gen AI will not tell you that. It will not tell you where the information came from. It will not tell you how it got an essay out of your prompt. So we get frustrated with that. In fact, we make fun of this all the time. So when Gen AI does this, and it's looking at those patterns, and it can't find certain information, and there are gaps in those patterns, what occurs is what we call hallucinations. And this is what everybody's writing about right now, about how it gives you bad information, it gives you wrong information. What it's giving you are hallucinations. It's giving you things that aren't exactly right. They're wrong. I'm going to give you some examples and show you what I mean by that. What this is based on is something called proxy variables, that if it doesn't have a full pattern to give you what you want, it makes up its own proxy variable, something that it's putting in to hold that place that it doesn't have the information for. So there are a lot of gaps that get filled in with something proxy, all right? So what this means, I'll give you a quick little example. I asked, when ChatGPT first came out and I started playing with it, I asked ChatGPT to write a biography of me and my work. You know, when in academia, when we publish something, we always have to provide a bio. What are your background? You know, and it provided a bio. And everything in that bio was wrong. But everything in that bio sounded exactly right. Received his PhD from University of Pittsburgh. Nope, sorry, never even set foot on the campus of University of Pittsburgh. Wrote this article, wrote this book. They sound exactly like the titles of my books, of my articles, but nope, never wrote any of those. So it's filling in proxy variables that sound right, but are not right. And this is where everybody's getting in trouble, because what everybody's doing is they're saying, send a press release about such and such, it prints it out, and they're looking, sounds right, and they're sending it out. That's where the trouble comes in, is because we're relying right now on Gen AI independent of our own work and our own thought. You cannot do that. I'll talk about it in a second. So early on, while I was starting to learn some of the Gen AI as ChatGPT came out, I asked, I've got a salmon fixation, I will admit. Love salmon fishing, love eating salmon, got a salmon tattoo. So I asked ChatGPT to turn out a list of facts about salmon. It turned out some really interesting facts about salmon. One of which was salmon swim in rivers. All right, that's hard to argue with, right? But I thought, all right, if this is what Gen Tech is showing me about salmon, how does that now generate an image? So I took this and I put it back into Midjourney, and I asked it to give me an image of salmon swimming in rivers. Now they've fixed this, and I'll show you in a second. This to me became exemplar because in the data set on the internet, there are more culinary images of salmon than there are either ichthyological, marine science, or fishing images of salmon. So what the Gen Tech had done was look for the most commonly repeated pattern in the data set, and in that data set, fillets were more prevalent than fish. This is a hallucination. It's a good hallucination, but it's a hallucination. So now they have repaired that. I just the other day used Dolly, asked for salmon swimming in rivers, got these output. Firefly got these output. They're still not exactly right. Some of those salmon look a little more sturgeon-like or may not have all the salmonoid characteristics, or they're not species specific. And I'll come back to this. There's a reason for that as well. We now have to adopt the term, we always said a picture's worth 1,000 words. Nope, a picture is worth however many words it takes you to get your Gen AI to give you the picture that you want. We can now quantify that beyond 1,000 words. All right, so those are some backgrounds. So let's talk about how we're going to deploy this and what we use it for. I've been talking about this stuff so much, I got to this slide and my brain says, there's like 10 hours more stuff you have to talk about with hallucination and the black box and all that. Let's talk about deploying for a second. Now, back in the 1970s, we had this argument about automating the automotive industry, and everybody kept saying, I'm going to lose my job to a robot, I'm going to lose my job to a robot. Did everybody lose their jobs to robots? No, not at all. You are not going to lose your job to AI. You're going to lose your job to somebody who now knows how to deploy AI, because AI ain't doing it on its own. And let's keep thinking about this. Part of this has to do with what we talk about as the human-machine interaction or human-machine collaborations. It's not the machine alone, it's not us alone. We're working with the AI. We're integrating, okay? Again, the prompt, the black box, and the output. If you are willing to accept that your prompt is giving the scrub what you want to get the output, that seems like a pretty difficult way to put your faith in that machine across the board. This is also why right now, prompt engineering is going to become the primary conversation tied to AI deployment. Can you all think back about 15, 20 years ago? How many of you would have imagined that as a business that we would need something called a social media marketing manager? That we would need, that social media was going to become so important in our businesses that we needed to actually hire social media experts, right? Back then, all you had to do was snap a picture and put it up and hope somebody liked it. Now, and those of you who were here for my last session, doesn't work that way, and we have actually hired social media experts. Prompt engineering is the next big job in technology. Those people who know how to train and use the AI to get what you want out. If I have my students write an essay about Moby Dick and somebody writes, Write an essay about Moby Dick. Do you think that output is going to meet the needs of the essay? Absolutely not. Part of what we have to do is we're training in prompt engineering. Anybody who puts in one prompt and expects an output without revision, without understanding, writing prompts is now a new writing task. It's not about writing 5 words to get 500 words. You still have to give specific, direct instructions to Gentech to give. It ain't magic, people. You're not going to wave a wand and go, hey, AI, make everything I ever needed. You've got to guide and direct it. Prompt engineering, and there's also now a new subset of prompt engineering called prompt whispering, which is derivative of that horse whispering thing of people who are really good at it, who can really tweak that engineering into incredibly detailed images and film and text. But mark my words, we come back here in 10 years, we're going to be talking about prompt engineering in the same way we were talking about social media now compared to what we were doing back then. So how do we use this? First of all, content generation, and I mean any content. AI can make any content you want. Images, audio, film, apps, computer programs, essays. This stuff will make anything you want. You find the right platform, you learn how to use it, it will churn things out. You've seen some of the pictures, the text, also the picture of that fishing lure I showed. I'll show some others in a minute. All Gen AI push out. Now, my work with Adobe, Adobe's getting ready to release some new Gen AI that will blow your mind. If I were demoing this, I would take a picture. Any picture you wanted to send me, whatever. And you know how you take a picture and it's always in the frame of your phone, or whatever, but there are limits to what's over here, 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 here. With the new Gen AI and Adobe, I can mark just 1 pixel line down the side of a picture and hit generate, and it'll tell it how long. It will create a landscape, and it will all bleed seamlessly into the photo that you gave me. It may not be what's really there, but now I have a beautiful image that I never took, and it looks as real as the image I took. And if I decide, oh, I want a lighthouse on that sandbar, add a lighthouse. It'll give me 15 different lighthouses to pick from. I don't have to do anything anymore. Generate, generate, generate. All of our content can be AI generated, and as I said, we've been doing this for a decade now. It's going to get better and better and better. Look, reality is out the door here, people. I don't have to go through that, hey, hold the fish up all the way out so that it looks bigger, right? No, I don't even have to have the fish. Add fish, make it a world record marlin. Hey, no, easy. All easily done. And then I fine tune it. It will design anything you want. You need logos. I'm sorry, graphic artists. I'm sorry, designers. But learn this stuff. The numbers of graphic artists who are furious with me for talking about this stuff. You know, but it's not doing real design. I went to design school and graphic arts school. Yeah, photographers said the same thing when we got phones that had cameras in it. So it will design anything and everything, but again, don't let it be alone. You've got to interact and tweak and make it what you want. Don't just blindly take what it does. Logos, your documents, you know, your web pages, it'll do it all. It'll also interact with your customers. Chatbots, visual assistants, auto responses that are customized to what your customers are asking about. Got a chatbot we're building. We use it all over UF. You go to a web page on most UF web pages, and Alligator pops up now and says, you have a question. What are the enrollment requirements? Boom, she'll tell you, you know, and so you can have chatbots. I mean, we're all interacting with chatbots anyway. Gives you great data summaries. Those of your companies who are working with big data sets, whether it's customer input data sets, I'm working with a new platform right now that will summarize anything I give it. If I took every article written in any Bonnier magazine over the last 10 years and asked it, summarize what are the key points, bang, 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 and I don't have to read all those articles. It will do data summaries for your work. If you're working in engineering a new product and you've got large data set, Brooke, I'm looking right at you and some of the numbers you use in designing some of the the rod stuff. Take those numbers, dump it in here. Chris is out of a job, and but it will do data analysis for you at such a rapid pace. It will do simulation and testing like you wouldn't believe, where you can set up simulated testing scenarios and have AI run right through them for you. This has become very important in engineering and science, where instead of having to run the same test over and over again, now you can simulate. Here's the thing. When ChatGPT dropped in November, the newspapers were all on about plagiarism and cheating and all this policing stuff and negative stuff. Look, if you're using this stuff, the first thing you have to have as your rule one is a form of integrity. And the form of integrity that I'm talking about here is transparency and documentation. Don't use it and pretend it's your own work. Identify, I use ChatGPT to help generate some of this content, or this part of my content is this, both in terms of your own personal integrity. I mean, personally, if one of the magazines that I write for said, hey, Sid, we need an article on such, and I, ChatGPT, write an article about this, and I turned it in and I got paid the $50 that magazines pay these days, and probably will go down now because, personally, I couldn't do that. Because I have a degree of integrity about representing my work. And also, chances are there are going to be hallucinations in that work that I'd really rather have attributed to me. So personal integrity, and my two rules are always transparency and documentation. Let people know. If you are just wholesale using any Gen AI and passing it off on as your own, you're a fool. Because it's going to come back and bite you in the ass, and chances are if you're not spending time editing it, revising it, and making it something your own, it's going to be wrong too. And that's going to be a really poor representation. So I had wanted to demo a bunch of stuff today, but I can't bring product in that way, and also the newer stuff would take us way too long. And frankly, it's kind of boring just to watch other people do stuff. But I will recommend, go to YouTube, and there's several videos that demo Adobe's new Gen AI. Watch one of the 5-minute videos, and you will be jaw-dropped at what these new technologies can do. The other thing that I recommend is you take a look at Adobe's Express, which is a platform that will make anything you want. And you start off by, it says, what do you want? Instagram post, Facebook post, flyer, whatever, boom, it pulls up the template. You don't even have to have the image. What do you want in it? A fish. It'll bring in from its stock database. It does it all the labor for you. It does all the work for you. Now, we may have the philosophical argument of, well, how are you claiming that that's your work anymore? Look, most of the content we're turning out isn't art. It isn't stuff that we're hoping will be hung in a museum somewhere. It's stuff that has to be good enough to get our message across. If I were designing a large product catalog and I had most of the content, you know how fast this will generate it and change it and lay it out and do everything for me? I talked to a PR firm that, not in our industry, but I've talked to another PR firm that is laying off between 10 and 12 of their in-house writers because they can hire one prompt engineer to turn out twice as much content in a week than their 10 writers can do in a month. In terms of productivity, in terms of your own ability to get stuff done, this is wave of the future right here. I mean, it's here, it's now. It's not perfect, but ChatGPT dropped in November, and we're already looking at iteration number 4. Is 4, right, John? 4 or 5, all the way in 9 months. Think about how rapidly, 1,000 new platforms a week, like I said, what this is going to be able to do. So that's my quick run through on Gen AI.